Too Close to Call is a sports talk radio show brought to you by Kevin Mahalik, featuring commentary on the week's biggest sports news and events and engaging behind-the-scenes player interviews. While specializing in Philadelphia sports, Too Close to Call will also discuss issues and events happening on a national scale. Too Close to Call airs Tuesday from 1 to 2 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m.
Aloha and hello out there, everybody. What's going on? This is your host, Kevin Mahalik, and this is the first edition of Too Close to Call, the sports talk radio show here at USALA Media. Again, have this being the first inaugural edition, I wanted to take the first couple of minutes here and really take the time to thank USALA Media and Radio personally, thank Dillion Decasta, as well as others who we were able to partner with over the past couple of weeks to really bring this show to life and manifest it here, give you guys some sports talk radio, because after some discussions, it really seemed like that was the only true missing link here. A lot of other quality shows and content, but sports really seemed to have that one missing spot. So hopefully I can bring some quality intel, insights, statistics for all you guys, and we'll take a little bit of a national approach here with Too Close to Call, but having this be a Philadelphia radio station location, you will find a little bit more of a Philadelphia flavor, especially early on here as we hit the ground running and really kind of find our footing and where we really want to take the show. But as you guys heard in the intro, I'll give a little bit about my background and really what you can look forward to as we move forward here with Too Close to Call. But as I mentioned, my name is Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening once again. A little bit about me is I was born and raised in the Allentown area. I was born into a sports family, that's for dang sure. With my father, he actually played baseball at the University of Pittsburgh and then in a quality adult league in the greater Lehigh Valley, where he ended up being a Hall of Famer. So I was raised at the ballpark and at the yard pretty much my entire life growing up and had a lot of exposure to that sport there. But there was a time in around the middle school era where my family actually relocated to the greater Dallas, Texas area of the country. And back at that time, I didn't exactly know what I was getting into. But as we fast forward here, we actually were located in the greater South Lake Carroll school district area. And if you guys are high school sports fans or specifically high school football fans down there in the mid to late 2000s, you've heard that name before because that program actually won a national title on the high school level, went undefeated, finished number one, as well as they partnered with the Dallas Cowboys for some of their training camp facilities. And the Dallas Cowboys actually used their indoor facility to practice when the weather was bad. So imagine that, the professional team using a high school facility to improve. And that's the kind of level of competition in football that really opened my eyes to that sport down south. Now, not saying there isn't good football here in the greater greater Philadelphia or Northeast, but down there certainly a different beast. And I mentioned that team because, as you heard in the intro, some behind-the-scenes player interviews using my connections in the sports world. There were a few names from that team that I still stay in touch with today and hope to bring to you guys eventually here on the radio to have some quality conversations with. But the one gentleman there is Greg McElroy. And if you're a college football fan, you've heard that name before. He's currently calling games for ESPN as well as involved heavily in College Game Day, the preview show on Saturday mornings. And we haven't talked in about a year or so. Obviously, life gets in the way. It gets a little bit hectic, but I'm hoping to reconnect with him shortly to get him on here. But like I mentioned, that was really the football exposure I had. And then when it became high school time, my family relocated once again back up here north to the greater Philadelphia, Allentown area. And that's when ultimately, as you reach the high school age, you have to specialize in one sport over the other. And I decided to pursue baseball because based on the writing on the wall, it seemed like that was going to be the area that I had the most opportunity in, as well as to play college sports. So the long story short there is I actually attended Lehigh University in Bethlehem, PA to pursue my athletic career and pursue baseball. So I was fortunate enough to put together a quality career there at Lehigh, playing multiple positions. I was actually recruited only as a pitcher, but did not fall in love with that at the college level since I missed the hitting and day-to-day aspect of baseball. But went to my coach, communicated with him, tried to get an opportunity to play every day, and was after a solid inter-squad extended period of time, I was able to win a starting role and played first base, third base, a little bit of outfield, and over the next 3 years was actually able to, like I said, put together a solid career where I was voted all conference at 2 different positions my junior and senior year, as well as second team All-American All-Region by ABCA Rawlings in the All-East region there in 2011. So like I mentioned, a good career in baseball, and ultimately that's where the brunt of my knowledge is, but never truly left the football side of things as well. My roommates at Lehigh, one of them by the name of Will Rackley, another gentleman who went on to play professionally. He was a third-round draft pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars back in 2011. We've communicated with him before. He's definitely going to be willing to hop on the show here in the near future once we get into football season to kind of get a little bit, like I mentioned, behind-the-scenes aspects of the players and their day-to-day roles and responsibilities and things like that. But I bring that up because Will would watch a lot of film at the apartment and house, late at night when I was studying for exams and a lot of things like that. And so truly never really got away from football. I was able to almost take a coach's perspective of watching film and learning a lot of running techniques, formations, blocking schemes, pass blocking schemes, and kind of learn from the offensive line perspective really what they go through, having had a quarterback background growing up and knowing the offense that way. But like I mentioned, guys, first initial show here with Too Close to Call. Wanted to keep it, a little bit brief in the intro there, ultimately kind of give you a background of how we got here. But then that was my athletic career. So now once we get to the professional side of things, a little bit how this show, again, manifested itself. But I've recently had a podcast, Too Close to Call, of the same name. It is currently available on all your iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, any podcast platform you can think of, and have been basically covering, again, Philadelphia sports as well as touching on the national scene for the past 6 to 8 months or so. About 5 days a week, we record and release that. It is not live, such as this one from 1 to 2, so you can listen to that at your leisure after this episode if you enjoy the content and opinions that I am able to bring you. But the reason I bring that up is because I really, truly enjoy the community feel and aspect of podcasting and sports talk radio here with USALA Media. So I want to invite you guys to follow us, follow myself, follow Too Close to Call, follow USALA Media on all the social media platforms. It's USALA Media, that's USALA Media on Instagram and Facebook. Go ahead, click a follow there, follow along, and you guys can comment and interact with the show, as well as myself on the social media platforms. My personal page is Miho20. Miho is a little bit of a nickname. You may hear that sprinkled in here throughout, but it's the letter K, and then it's MIHO, the number 2 and the number 0, as well as Too Close to Call Cast, the number 2 both times. So the number 2 call, the number 2 Close Cast. And that way, based on what you guys hear today, the topics I cover, and everything else that's going on nationally, I know the sports scene can get a little bit overwhelming, especially when you're only covering it once a week. So I really, truly want to dictate conversation and drive the topics and, again, conversations that you guys really want to hear. So I don't want this to be a one-way street at all. I don't want to, just be talking to you guys about my thoughts for an hour or so. Obviously, this being the first episode, that's how today's going to go. But starting next week and weeks thereafter with football getting up and going, and that'll be a big portion of today's show as we get into the following segments. We'll touch on the Philadelphia Phillies as well today, and then eventually hockey, basketball. I will be honest with you, I'm not as strong in the soccer world. the Philadelphia Union. I do follow, but I don't as intensely as these other sports. That's one sport I never grew up playing. So I certainly appreciate the skill involved, but I don't have that firsthand experience to speak to. But if that's what you guys want to hear and talk about, I'm more than willing to dive in, do the research, and get you guys what you want to listen to. And the only way that I can learn what some of those conversations are and topics you want discussed are for you guys to reach out to me and us here at USALA Media and Radio and let us know in the comments, direct messages, Twitter as well, Facebook, like we mentioned, and you guys can really, not dictate the conversation, but obviously I want to talk about what it is you want to hear and, read some of your takes or opinions, maybe give my rebuttals on those, because I'm sure over the next 45, 50 minutes here, I'm going to say something that one of you is going to disagree with, but that's the beauty of sports. It's open conversation, and I'm certainly willing to hear different sides of the argument and go back and forth, because that's the beauty of it, the banter you can have and the conversations that go back and forth. But appreciate you guys listening. That's really it here for the first segment. Like I mentioned, a little bit quick because I want to save some time for the meat and potatoes of the episode, getting into football being back, specifically the Eagles. Like I mentioned, then we'll do a Phillies segment, and we'll wrap up with some general football, NFL predictions, and Week 1 preseason conversation. So once again, this is Kevin Mahalik with 2Close2Call here at USALA Media. I appreciate you guys listening. Hang around here. We'll take a quick break, but we'll be back on the other side, and we'll be talking Philadelphia Eagles. Welcome back, everybody. If you're just tuning in, this is 2Close2Call, the new sports talk radio show here at USALA Media. And if you're a carryover from the first segment, I appreciate you guys not tuning me out yet. So thanks for hanging in there with us. But as I mentioned in the intro and a little bit briefly there, this segment we have will actually be focused around the Philadelphia Eagles. Go Birds, baby. The football is back. They open up this Thursday. First preseason game. We got the Tennessee Titans starting this weekend. There won't be another weekend without football until the second weekend in February. And if that doesn't get the juices flowing a little bit as a football fan and a previous player, I don't know what will. I know, talking to a lot of my friends and listening to the talk radio out there, people are itching to start to watch guys hit each other again and really get things going. This training camp, two-hand touch stuff you can only take so much of, specifically with the new NFLPA rules and not allowing the guys to tackle to the ground more than one day a week and things like that. I know we get a little bit antsy, but fortunately enough, I was able to attend Eagles practice last week. It was not one of the open practices, or I guess the open practice, since they only have one this year. That one was this past Sunday. We're going to touch on that one a little bit as well, but really focusing on last Tuesday. The energy and the effort and the focus from Doug Peterson was truly on red zone offense and red zone defense. And I think this portion of football, the red zone specifically, is the most important segment, right? So in the year of 2019, with the way defenses are being officiated and all the new rules that are being implemented, it is truly an offensive game out there. Pass interference can now be challenged, and they just continue every year to make it more and more favored to the offense. And that's where the yards that teams tend to chew up and gain are not as important, or not frowned upon as much as points. And truly, listening to Jim Schwartz, that's what he's preaching to these individuals is, listen, we're going to give up yards, you're going to give up plays, but once you get inside your own 35 or 20, you really need to hunker down and hold them to 3 points. And if you're remembering back to last year, that was a struggle for the Philadelphia Eagles offense, as well as Carson Wentz in particular, because yes, there were a lot of games where people were complaining about the defense, and specifically on the top of my mind, I believe it was the Titans last year, who beat the picket fence on 4th and 12, ended up scoring a touchdown late in the game to win that game, as well as there was the Carolina Panthers game at home where the defense gave up the game-winning touchdown late in the game. But if you look back at the scores of those games, they were in the 20s. And I remember yelling at the offense that they need to pick it up. And it's truly, one of the reasons why we're yelling at the defense is because we're putting them in this situation at the end of the game. So to see with my own eyes Doug Peterson really take this information and learn and know that we need to improve in this area was a sight to see in person, that's for sure. But the initial feedback at practice was that the defense won the day. And the feedback that I'm hearing is outside of some spurts here or there, the defense is winning the day more often than not. Even with the open practice, I know a lot of the initial hoopla and feedback was around Deshaun Jackson and some of the moves he was able to put on gentlemen in the one-on-one drills and the 7-on-7, and it certainly is impressive to watch him do his thing. But as a whole, when it came to kind of red zone and things like that, the defense was still very stout, and those are one of the big questions really going into this year. And after that little bit of a rant or ramble, what I figured we'd do here over the next 10 to 15 minutes or so is kind of dive in on a position by position basis and really run through the squad from offense to defense. That way we can touch on some of the offseason storylines, new individuals, and really what to look for specifically in training camp as we get into preseason games on who ultimately may make the squad. So we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, and you can't go anywhere else but quarterback, the most important position on the football field. We have a new $32 million a year man, Carson Wentz, back healthy this year. Again, seeing him in person and on TV, I know it's been written and reported, but he is down about 15 to 20 pounds. Now, I'm on the fence when it comes to whether or not that is going to be good or bad for this year, because big picture as a whole, I do think him being slimmed down is really the playing weight he needs to be at and really where he's going to be at his most effective. However, if he runs the ball and continues to try to extend plays and use his athleticism as much as he has in the past, that loss of 10 to 15 pounds may just mean there's not as much padding for him to absorb all of these hits. And the conversation coming out of Eagles camp from Dougie P all the way up to Jeffrey Lurie from Carson Wentz himself is that he has learned his lesson. Okay, he's been injured, I think, 3 out of the 3 years, but he's eventually missed games in only 2 out of the 3 years. But it's something that is clearly the label of Carson that is truly, truly the only negative, is that he is injury prone and he has health concerns. And going into his, 3rd, 4th year here, it's one of those things where he's going to start to need to learn that the instincts that he has when that rusher's coming at him and the ability to make them miss, extend the play, throw the ball all the way down the field to Nelson Aguilar against the Seahawks last year for a heck of a play. Like, yes, those are Sports Center, NFL primetime worthy plays, but over the course of 16 games, we may, pass on a few of those just to keep Carson healthy. So if he does truly stay in the pocket more, doesn't take as many hits, I think the weight loss is going to be a positive. If not, I don't know. I'm concerned about, his brittleness and getting beat up as well. And that compounds and will bounce around the offense, but with the offensive line. And that may be the second most important position that the Eagles have here moving forward. And they do have some questions and some camp battles going on with that position. Now, the starting 5 are pretty much etched in stone. The only true question we have there is going to be the availability of Brandon Brooks for week 1, coming off the Achilles last year. Now, if you ask him or you listen to him or you watch his Instagram, he's telling you that he thinks he'll be ready for week 1. I've never torn my Achilles. My father did a little bit ago, and he is not a 350-pound professional athlete, but it took him some time to come back to be himself. So I can only imagine adding a little bit more mass and a little bit more athletic ability on that Achilles got to be tough to come back from. But the one positive there is that the gentleman at left tackle, Jason Peters, is returning or did return from a very similar injury, if not last year, the year before. So you can basically look a few helmets to your left and talk to that gentleman on what it's like to return from and what you can expect, because you can only assume there's going to be a slight hiccup eventually, whether it's just some general soreness or a little bit of a setback. But for him to be ready week 1, I think is a little bit of a stretch. But the starting 5, like I said, pretty much in there. You got Peters at left tackle, Samalu at left guard, Jason Kelsey at center, Brandon Brooks at right guard, and then Lane Johnson paved the lane at right tackle. And that dude is an absolute animal. Look out for him this year. If you saw his recent Instagram post, oh my gosh, is it scary. The evolution of the heavy NFL offensive lineman has officially taken place, and we got big guys with six-packs almost now at the offensive line. So it's pretty ridiculous, and he's the best right tackle in football, in my opinion. Some argue the best tackle overall, but, I think he is going to be one to watch this year. So the questions really present themselves when it comes to the second team in the offensive line, specifically at the left tackle position, because we all know out there Jason Peters is not going to start and finish 16 National Football League games. Okay, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know it's been at least a handful of years. And the over-under, according to some websites out there, is around that 8 or 9 mark. So certainly nowhere close to 16. Now, I do think it'll be a little bit of the over. When it comes to starting and finishing and playing 100% of the snaps, I don't think it's going to happen more than 6 or 7 times this year. But in regards to missing a series here or there, I do think that is more of what we're looking at. And Doug Peterson and the Eagles have truly found how to manage his time and get the best out of Jason Peters when it comes playoff time, because for all the hoopla and conversation last year around whether or not he still has it, he should retire, we're going to cut him, he's not worth it. In that playoff game against Khalil Mack, he was really good. We did not hear Khalil Mack's name very often, and that was due to Jason Peters. So when he comes out of the game this year, the question is who is going to replace him? And there are a few options right now, but over the past week or two, even since I was at practice last Tuesday, word on the street is that Andre Dillard, the Eagles' first-round draft pick this past year out of Washington State, has really, really improved. And the area where he has improved the most is with his hands. Now, he's a huge gentleman. He's super athletic. But in college, you don't face a lot of the bull rush, and the hand fighting is nowhere near the level in the NFL. Hand fighting as an offensive lineman is the second most important thing besides your feet, your positioning, right? So your balance and your hand fighting, because gentlemen at that level use any sort of leverage that they can to get you off of your game. I mean, you got a lot of defensive ends like Brandon Graham, who's a little bit smaller, and you think to yourself, really, how's he do this? But he's able to leverage getting underneath these big individuals and really, being able to maneuver them whichever way he wants to once you get underneath them. So that was an area of concern for Dillard. But as I've been following along and talking to people this past week, that area seems to have really improved and has come along almost daily, which is a tremendous sign because we haven't even gotten into preseason games yet. And he'll be one of the individuals who plays a lot of the snaps because he's going to need that amount of work. The only true cautionary tale with Dillard yet is the bull rush attempt. We were at practice and we saw Deshaun Hall, a defensive end who's trying to make the squad as the 5th or 6th defensive end. He went against Andre Dillard and essentially bull rushed him, put his hands right in his chest, got up underneath him and pushed his butt right back into the quarterback. And, next play, run it back. Andre Dillard makes the adjustment and then wins the second rep. But it's those power rushers and larger individuals that may give him some trouble when ultimately he'll be able to handle a little bit more of the athletic speed guys around the edge. But Andre Dillard seems to be the guy taking over at left tackle when Peters isn't going out. The Big V experiment seems to have moved to the inside. We're actually seeing him get second-team reps at guard. Initial feedback is still some room for improvement there with Big Fee. He's more athletic than you think he is. However, it's a position that he's never played. He was a tackle in college, never really been a guard, and the cross training there is what the Eagles are trying to do to really produce him and get some value potentially even on the trade deadline, or not the deadline, but to trade when roster cuts come at the end of training camp in the preseason. So you have Stefan Wisniewski comes back on a contract contract. He's your backup center, swing guards inside. Matt Pryor is another guard, another, I believe, 4th or 5th round draft pick who they like. And then the last gentleman is Jordan Mailata, the former rugby player who had never played professional football before the Eagles picked him up last year. And it's still a little bit early, but word is starting to fade in regards to that this gentleman is the next Jason Peters, the next Hall of Famer, the next big thing at offensive tackle, because people like to take, similar to Lane Johnson, former quarterback, then a tight end, now a tackle, they like to take these slightly smaller individuals, put some weight on them, and use their athleticism. But the 10 offensive linemen is really going to be a question mark if they're going to keep 10. They can typically take 9, 10. If they take 10, they're going to have to be a little bit shorter somewhere else, whether it's linebacker, safety, wide receiver. It's one of those positions where there's going to be about 5 or 6 names at 5 or 6 positions, and you're really only going to be able to keep 3 or 4 of those individuals. So that's the big battle on the offense. Now, a wide receiver, the top 4, those guys are automatic locks. Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, the second rounder out of Stanford, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Those guys will make it. And then you have a couple of individuals fighting for that last spot. And this is another battle to watch here in these preseason games. Some of the gentlemen battling here we have are names that you may recognize, but individuals like Mac Hollins, who's been hurt on and off and may not make the club because he's in the tub. That's one of the sayings coming out of training camp, as well as Shelton Gibson. He walked off the field Sunday at open practice, and he's another individual who can't afford to miss time to still make the team. So the names you're going to want to look out for are Charles Johnson, who was actually just recently in the AAF. If you guys watched that startup football, what the heck's it called? A league, I guess, right? It was about 2.5 months, but he was the MVP of the wide receivers in that league. And then the standout star from practice the other day, and a gentleman who's continued to make plays, but that is Carlton Aguduzi out of Rutgers. Now, this guy's a little bit of an anomaly because he did not have a great career at Rutgers. However, when you watch him, he stands out. He's 6'6", 220, got the build, making a lot of quality catches in traffic. And again, they scored, I think, 4 red zone touchdowns when we were there, and this guy had 3 of them, and they were all on contested catches. So certainly something to look out for there. When it comes to tight ends, we got Ertz, Goddard, Richard Rodgers on the team, and then Joshua Perkins and Will Tye really kind of fighting for that last roster spot there, with Joshua Perkins may have the inside line because he can cross-train with the wide receivers and things like that. So that's what you need to look out for on the offensive side of the ball. As for the defensive side of the ball, a lot more question marks when it comes to who's going to play and where, and this is more so due to injury. There is a little bit of a talent, a position to it. The corners, right? So 6 corners on this roster could realistically stake claim to a starting position. You have Ronald Darby, who's coming off an ACL tear, who's probably not going to be ready for week 1, but he is a starter when he returns because you didn't pay a guy $8 million this offseason to come back when he had other options on the market. He would have taken those if we weren't giving him a starting position. Sidney Jones, former second-round pick out of Washington, and this is his 3rd year, and really a make-or-break year for Sidney Jones. He had the Achilles come draft day, missed all of the first year. Last year, he battled a hamstring on and off, and we saw against the Saints, as we looked behind the scenes, they really attacked Sidney Jones, knowing that he wasn't going to be able to hold up for the full 60 minutes of the game, and they were right on it. They ran at him, and he ended up coming out, and they washed the floor with us that game down there in New Orleans. But he has been the star of the show in training camp thus far. When we were there, he was excellent. As I follow along other writers and individuals who are there on a regular basis, he has been fantastic. And the person who's played across from him is Rasul Douglas, because Jalen Mills is still out with a foot injury. So your starters from last year, Mills and Darby, still injured, which leaves you with Jones, Maddox, Avonte Maddox out of Pittsburgh, and then Rasul Douglas. And those 3 have been 3 of the more impressive Eagles at training camp, no matter the position. The the defensive secondary has been the strength of this team, and it's truly amazing because as of last year, it was a circus. We were bringing guys off the street for the playoff game. Crevan LeBlanc, I remember he had a heck of an interception on Drew Brees, but 2 weeks before that, I didn't even know the guy existed. So for them to now turn that into the depth of 5, 6, 7 guys who can play at the NFL level is truly, truly impressive, and it'll be something to watch. So the cornerback battle, as well as some of the safeties, Blaine Countess that they have, Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McClown, Andre Sandejo. They just signed Cyprian, I believe is how you pronounce his name, coming off a couple of injuries. And the thing with the Cyprian and Sandejo signing is they may cross-pollinate and cross-train these guys at linebacker because just recently at practice, KGH, or Camus Gruget Hill, went out with an injury, and now it's not a season-ending injury, but the word is it is a grade 3 MCL sprain, which will be a couple of months. So the guy who was looking to be a starting linebacker for us and one of the more impressive bodies in camp, almost making a play every day, is no longer going to be available for the first couple of months. So Jim Schwartz is going to have to change up a little bit of his thinking and his process there, and that's where they may migrate some of these safeties down into the box and run a little bit more dime package or nickel package, meaning they have 5 defensive backs and less linebackers. Because as of now, your linebackers lining up were Zach Brown and Nate Gary. And those are 2 names that were not household names. Now, this is because Nigel Bradham is injured and not running, as well as Zach Brown. They signed from the Redskins. But you got Bradham, Brown, Gary, and then in backup you got Singleton, Edwards, and Fort. Now, those are 3 individuals all trying to make the team as backup linebackers as well as special teamers. So they should be somebody to watch this Thursday as well as we get into week 1. But the last position to wrap up, and we'll get off Eagles conversation after this, but defensive ends. Outside of Derek Barnett, Brandon Graham, and Vinny Curry, who came back from the Buccaneers, they really don't know who's going to be that 4th, 5th, 6th defensive end. And Joe Ostman, who was standing out in camp, went off with an injury, and it did seem to be serious. They haven't released what it is, but he was carted off, and based on the reactions of the players and, really high-fiving him on the way out, it did not look good. So he, unfortunately kind of removed himself from the equation. But the 3 individuals vying for either that 4th or 4th and 5th spot are Josh Sweat, former 4th-round pick, Sharif Miller, as well as, what's the last gentleman's name? Deshaun Hall. Those are the 3 guys who will be battling for that 4th, 5th, 6th spot. Hello and welcome back, everybody. If you are just joining us, thank you very much for joining us here. This is 2Close2Call, the new sports talk radio station here at USALA Media. And if you're still with us after the first couple of segments, thank you so much for sticking with me here as we continue to bounce around the sports world and what's going on. And as I mentioned in the intro, being a greater Philadelphia located radio station, we will have a Philadelphia flavor as we discuss these sports teams. And with it being the month of August, the 2 most prevalent sports teams out there are the Philadelphia Eagles as well as the Philadelphia Phillies, who are continuing to move along. They got 40 to 50 games left here to finish the year, and oh, man, where do I start with this team? Oh, goodness, they're giving me a headache. I'm just rubbing my head right now trying to wrap around where to go with this extremely uninspiring baseball team that is still somehow, as of today, currently in playoff position. I can't fathom what's going on there across the board. But just to take an overall point of view, brief update on the Phillies year. Like I mentioned, currently, I believe 5 games back in the division behind the Atlanta Braves, tied for the first wild card spot with the Washington Nationals, a half a game up on the St. Louis Cardinals. So as of August 6th, they are currently a playoff team. However, if you're from the greater Philadelphia area or a fan and watch them every day, you know truly that this team does not have what it takes to compete with the upper echelon of Major League Baseball, whether that's the Dodgers, the Astros, the Yankees, a lot of those teams, really kind of asserting themselves at the favorites. But with that being said, again, having the baseball background that I do have, I am not giving up on the Philadelphia Phillies this year. I am going to try my best to remain glass half full and positive when it comes to the final month and a half of the year, and that they can pull it out and make the playoffs for the first time in 8 years, because up until this point, the performance of the mainstays and the people that they think are the core of this team have truly been disappointing. I was doing some research last night, and being the baseball nerd that I am, I was truly enjoying it. But using baseballsavant.com, there's a lot of advanced metrics, or the sabermetrics that everybody loves to use now, the analytics side of baseball. And some of the numbers I was able to find were a little bit concerning for me. So I wrote down, again, kind of the core 5 or 6 and some key areas where they have struggled, or where ultimately they'll need to improve going forward for this team to really make a run, because they started off well, then they've really kind of played, not great baseball for the past 2 months or so, and they haven't put together that true run of 8-2 or 15-5, or since the All-Star break, your New York Mets are 19-6, and even the New York Mets are putting together a run here over the month that the Phillies haven't. And again, diving into it, it was because I looked at some of the main names, and starting with Cesar Hernandez, because based on the lineup last night, he's been back into the leadoff role, which has been the worst role for the Phillies offense. The leadoff hitter is supposed to be your catalyst, and since Andrew McCutchen went down, they've gotten absolutely no production out of the leadoff spot. And if you would have asked if Andrew McCutchen's loss would have had that big of an impact, I would have never thought it. I know the gentleman's a former MVP, he's truly a professional, but really his presence, the amount of pitches he saw, the walks he worked at the top of the lineup, really set the table for the rest of these guys. But back to Cesar, pulling up some of his metrics, he is in the 8th percentile, so not great. The higher the number, the better there in the percentiles. He's in the 8th and 10th percentile when it comes to hard hit and exit velocity. Meaning this guy's not hitting the ball hard at all when it comes to the rest of Major League Baseball. As well as, if you're going to do that, he has a 9% launch angle on average, which means he's a line drive ground ball hitter. Now, at the top of your lineup, you would think that would work, but the problem is that he doesn't walk very often, or at least he hasn't recently. He's hitting 284, but his OBP is only 330, so only a 50 percentage point increase there, which means if he's not hitting the ball, he's not really getting on base. That's a sprinkling of a walk or two as you continue to, go throughout the course of the year. But the main culprits, and the main 3 are Rhys Hoskins, Bryce Harper, and JT Realmuto. Okay? Now, the underlying statistics of Bryce Harper say that he is preparing to finally have one of these hot streaks. Bryce Harper is in the 87th percentile for both hard hit percentage and exit velocity. So Hoskins, he's in the 47th and 33rd, respectively. So that tells you right there, when Harper hits the ball, he hits it hard and he hits it far. He's just not hitting it enough. And that's the main problem as I continued to dive down, was there were 2 statistical anomalies within Harper's stats. One was that he is only hitting 181 on breaking balls this year. 181. So anything off speed, non-changeup, anything else, 181. As well as with the bases empty, he's hitting 164. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, with the bases empty, Harper's clearly seeing nothing but breaking balls, because they're not worried about throwing balls in the dirt or runners advancing. They can throw it wherever the heck they want. And he's chasing these pitches, which is causing him to hit 220, 230, 240, because the guy has actually been good with runners on base and runners in scoring position. It's the other at-bats where he's up with nobody on, 2 outs in the first, and you get a strikeout because he's trying to hit the ball 500 feet. It's a little bit frustrating to watch, and his launch angle of an average of 12.5 is the lowest of his career. And that's amazing because here's a guy who all you see and envision is home runs. He's bailing out. He's trying to launch everything. And it's not happening this year. 12.5. He's 63rd in the major leagues in home runs. We paid this guy $330 million, and he's 63rd in home runs. There was a time the other day, and if you're a Phillies fan and you hear this and you haven't heard this yet, you may need to sit down because it knocked me right off my feet, is Freddie Galvis. For about 25 minutes of real time, because it was right before Harper actually homered in the night game. But they had the same amount of home runs this year at 18. Freddie Galvis, we watched him play for 5 years. We know he's not a power hitter. And Harper's got the same amount of home runs. I don't truly understand, what exactly is causing this, because if you watched last night's game after the off day or after the day game in Arizona, Harper's changed his hands again. So I will give the guy credit because he's constantly making adjustments. He's constantly looking at ways to, slightly change his hands to improve. And that's something that I love because I used to do that all the time in college too. You get on a tee or you do front toss and you get to your launch pattern, because what he's doing is it's before he gets to his load. When he gets to his load, he's typically in the same spot and has been all year. Now, as a hitter, you do whatever you can to get your rhythm and get comfortable. And then right as the pitcher is getting to the top of their motion is when you load and get ready. Now, just recently, if you noticed, Harper had his bat almost down over his shoulder, facing the ground behind him, and then would bring it up as he went to load. Now, I noticed last night he was actually doing the exact opposite. He was being a little bit more Christian Yelich-like, if I may drop that. I don't know if specifically that was somebody he used, but he was a little bit more vertical, had his hands a little bit higher. He himself was a little bit more vertical, not as crouched. And, he still got to that similar load position, but the bat path to getting there was different, which ultimately I think is going to help him throw the hands and hopefully lift more baseballs, because if he's not lifting and driving baseballs, the Phillies are going to be in trouble these last 2 months, and they're not going anywhere. They're going to need a Harper or a Hoskins hot streak to get somewhere. But again, I will give Harper credit because he's not just doing nothing and expecting changes. The guy is making adjustments. He is working, whether it's with the hitting coach or his own hitting coaches. I don't know who the heck's working with him, but he is trying to make some changes. So we'll see how that goes. He was 2 for 15 in the month of August going into last night. I saw he did have a hit a few more other balls hard. So I'm curious to see how long he sticks with this new, kind of loading mechanism or change moving forward. But that's something to keep an eye out on with Bryce as we head down the stretch here. When it comes to JT Realmuto, he is flirting with that breakout month. He has been excellent behind the plate the entire year. His framing, his pitch calling, his throwing is in the top 10 to 15th percentile across Major League Baseball. And his hitting is starting to come around. So he's in the 54th percentile of hard hit and 77th in exit velocity. I keep saying philosophy. I don't know why. Excuse me out there, guys. But JT Realmuto. So he has a launch angle as well of 13.3 degrees. And this is similar to Harper of 12.5. These are line drive exit angles. And where you need to be, or where they preach, is between 25 and 30 is the optimum launch angle when it comes to hitting home runs and hitting the ball the furthest. So when you see an individual above 20, that tends to mean they lift the ball, but you want it below that 30 mark, obviously, because that's when it gets into pop-ups in the infield and to the outfield and everything like that. So that 25, 27 mark is really your sweet spot there, which is almost double where Harper and Realmuto are. So that's just, food for thought for them to really work on. But the number that stuck out with Realmuto was his chase percentage. He's chasing a career high 34% of pitches. And if you think about it, once every 3 pitches, you're chasing one out of the zone. That just spells struggle at the plate, because one of the things I learned that once you rise amongst the levels of college baseball, minor league baseball, is pitch selection is one of the most important areas of baseball and of hitting, because you can put the best swing on the ball, but if you're not swinging at the right pitch in the right count, you're truly going to struggle, because you have to have a plan of attack and really know what you're going to get and what you're looking for to do damage up there. And that's something that JT, just chasing 1/3 of the time, has kind of struggled with this year. The last gentleman on here, or I guess two here I have, one of them briefly, Adam Hazley, the new outfielder, former first-round pick out of the University of Virginia. He's been growing on me as more of a big league player. However, again, once you dive into some of these analytics and metrics, there's some numbers that pop out where you go, oh, I didn't know that, or I didn't realize that. And the two things with Hazley are he does not have a hit off a breaking ball yet this year. The guy's hitting 200 plus, and he still doesn't have a hit off a breaking ball. So doing all of his damage off of fastballs, as well as when he hits in the 8-hole, he's hitting 308. When he's anywhere else in the lineup, he's not hitting well. So basically that means put him in the 8-hole, he gets fastballs because he's down in the 8-hole above the pitcher, he's doing well. Put him in the 6th or 7th spot, have him see more breaking balls, he's struggling. So that tends to come with development, obviously, because those hitters haven't seen breaking balls that are major league level down at AA and AAA, and he only spent about a week at AAA. So really going from AA to the bigs, that secondary pitches are really what separates the men from the boys there, and it's going to take a second for him to come around and truly be able to get on some off-speed pitches. As we shift over to the pitching staff here for the last 5 minutes or so for the segment, it's the starting pitching guys, and we looked at this with the trade deadline. We'll kind of lump these two into one because basically every move they made outside of, I believe it was Corey Dickerson, was a pitcher. So clearly that's the aspect of the team that needs improvement, and yet I just spent 15 minutes almost on how the offense needs to pick it up. So, like I mentioned, how uninspiring this team is everybody's complaining about the pitching, and yet I just complained for 10 minutes. But everybody outside of Aaron Nola has really, truly been frustrating this year. And coming into this year, we were sold the fact that Pivetta, Eflin, Velasquez were going to take those steps forward in their development to truly become Major League Baseball pitchers. And unfortunately, it really hasn't happened for any of them. I mean, Vince Velasquez was demoted to the bullpen, had a few outings there, got promoted back due to injury, and actually in the last, 3, 4, 5 starts, he's been pretty good. He has an ERA of just over 3.2, I believe, over his last 3 or 4 starts, but the numbers that jump off the page on Velasquez, and this jump is something that should not be plausible. And they said these on the broadcast last night after I had seen him on the Twittersphere a little bit before that. But Vince Velasquez, first time through an order, opposing hitters are batting 192. Okay, so the second time through an order, they're batting 194. The third time through the order, so this essentially means when you're getting into the 5th, 6th, 7th innings, because you've seen these individuals for the third time, opposing batters are hitting 515. I can't do that math off the top of my head, but that's over a 300 percentage point increase from the second to third time you see Vince, which means his secondary pitches are not there because you're seeing everything, his fastball, his curveball through the first 2 at-bats, and then by the time you have the third at-bat, he doesn't have that third pitch to then wrinkle in there to keep you off balance because you've seen 10, 15, 20 pitches already of the only 2 pitches that he has. And this is why he can't go deep into games, and his outing of 7 innings last night was one of the more impressive outings that he's had this year. So Vince, I'm rooting for you, man, and we need you if we're going to make a run here. But just going from under 200 to over 500 is an anomaly that I don't think I have ever seen before. So, Vince, keep it up, man. We're going to need you down the stretch, as well as Nick Pivetta, the name I mentioned, who recently moved to the bullpen. So we have Penn Vetta, everybody's calling him now. And diving into Pivetta, I don't think we're going to see him start another game for the Phillies. If you've seen the attitude, the effort, and awareness that he delivered when it came to the 7th and 8th inning, and I believe he was used in extra innings the other day when they went 15 innings, but his mannerisms and intensity is fantastic. And the guy as a starter was really stoic, tried to, calm his emotions. You could see if there was a close pitch and it didn't go his way, he was really, really upset, but he didn't want to show it. And yet it still affected his performance. He didn't show it, but it affected his performance. And now in the bullpen, he knows that he's getting 6 outs at most, and he can go full throttle. And recently, this guy has been truly, truly impressive. And keep an eye out for his breaking ball, because opponents are hitting 346 off his fastball and 220 off of off-speed pitches. So we'll keep a lookout as he continues to move forward there as well. But Aaron Nola, he continues to be strong, figured it out since the All-Star break. The only last cause of concern I have across the pitching stats is looking at the horizontal movement of their breaking pitches. From Aaron Nola, whose curveball is moving 1.8 inches less horizontally. Velasquez's curveball is moving 2.3 inches less horizontally. Eflin is moving 2.2 inches less horizontally. It's just something to keep an eye on. I don't know if that has to do with the pitching coach or maybe new philosophies or what they're looking at, but just a lack of movement compared to last year to this year was just a cause for concern as I was diving into some of the numbers. But like I said, glass half full. We got 50, 60 games left, depending on what the math is, whichever day you're listening to this. They're currently still tied for the wild card with the Nationals. They have a bunch of games still coming with the Nationals down the stretch, the Braves as well. So there's going to be some quality baseball being played in August and September as the overlap with the Eagles come here on Labor Day. But stay in there with the Phillies, man. Don't give up on them yet. They're going to give us some playoff baseball. I'm feeling it. But that was the Philly segment here on Too Close to Call. Hang with us. We'll take a brief break, and then we'll close with the last couple of minutes. So I appreciate you guys listening in. Welcome back, everybody, to Too Close to Call, the sports talk radio station here at USALA Media. I appreciate you guys hanging in with me this long. It's almost been an hour here, our first full hour and live episode here. Hopefully I've been entertaining for you guys and you haven't clicked away, driven you away. But like I mentioned here for the last 5 minutes, we'll do a little bit of a wrap-up. Touch on NFL across the board. That's what I had in mind, depending on how long the conversation flowed there with the Eagles and Phillies. But basically, guys, I just want to reiterate that I want this show, this podcast, this entire brand to be truly interactive out there with you, the fans. Now, we're continuing to learn where our fans are, what they want to hear, what they want to be discussed. And again, I just want to remind everybody to go out there on social media to follow myself, interact with myself, as well as USALA Media on Facebook. It is USALA, USALA Media on Facebook, as well as Instagram. The Too Close to Call tag is Too Close to Call Cast, the number 2 both times there on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then my personal handle, again, is KMiho20. That's KMIHO, the number 2 and the number 0. Now, today's episode obviously was driven by the Philadelphia sports media, the Eagles and Phillies. With football opening up across the board, I wanted to lead with a lot of Eagles chatter, being at practice and having the exposure to that. But again, if you guys out there, or if you guys are Giants fans, or if we have a lot of Cowboys fans out there, please let me know in the comments, email me, things like that. We'll be able to discuss the Cowboys, things such as Ezekiel Elliott, whether or not he's going to play football this year. There was a report this morning that came out that he'd be willing to sit a couple of games in order to get paid. And I don't know, there seems to be a little bit of a pattern here when it comes to running backs. Le'Veon Bell maybe set a little bit of a dangerous precedent sitting out the entire year, because now we got the likes of Melvin Gordon and Ezekiel Elliott talking to their respective teams and ultimately trying to pull the leverage card of, well, I'm not going to play unless you pay me. And both of those teams are trying to battle for the playoffs and Super Bowl. So those are 2 high-quality individuals that they're going to want in the building. So definitely keep you guys posted on what's going on there. Dallas is exciting again, because is Dak Prescott going to get paid? When's he going to get paid? How much is he going to get paid? Should it be more or less than Carson Wentz? Personally, I think it should be less, but I think it's going to be more. So that's where I sit on that line. I would love to hear from you guys out there, whether or not you think Dak deserves 30 $30+ million, or if he should be over or under Wentz as well there. But Amari Cooper needs to get paid. Those three bad boys for the boys themselves, quarterback, running back, receiver, that can really be their core as they move forward. But they're going to have to figure out how to pay everybody, when they're going to pay them, how much they're going to pay them. That's going to be something to stay tuned for as we head into week 1 here in the preseason this weekend, with not only the Eagles, but everybody else across the league starting this weekend. Games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Some of the storylines to watch. I think, the most important one are these rookie quarterbacks. The first 4 rookie quarterbacks. Now, we got our first taste of Drew Luck with Denver in the Hall of Fame game last week. It was only for a few series, and he was not impressive whatsoever. Now, I know he was a second-round pick, but there was a lot of hoopla around the draft that he could sneak into that first round and ultimately be that John Elway protege that they've been looking for since Peyton Manning walked out of the building. And, I don't think Joe Flacco is going to be giving them this year. But that'll be a little bit of a transition. The other 3 gentlemen from bottom to top are Dwayne Haskins with the Redskins. He's battling Colt McCoy for that starting spot after Alex Smith, his injury from last year, is still carrying over into this year and may ultimately affect his entire playing career. But I think you'll see Dwayne Haskins sooner than later when it comes to playing in actual games in the NFL. So the next gentleman is Daniel Jones, New York Giants. The Giants fans are in a tough spot up there. So if you're a Giants fan listening, I need to know your thoughts. I want to hear what you're thinking on Eli, Daniel Jones, the boos at the draft. You respect Eli, but you don't like him anymore. That's the word I'm getting online. But I want to hear right from you guys. You guys need to let me know. We got to discuss Eli and Daniel in a little bit more detail moving forward. And then ultimately, Kyler Murray, the number 1 overall pick with Arizona. Him and, the coach there, Kingsbury, the young guy coming out of college, up-and-comer, kind of seeing how those two compound on each other and really work out this year is something I'm looking forward to. Now, him being a starter, I don't know how many reps he'll get here early on in the preseason, but certainly something to keep an eye on as, we have football is back. It's not the starters, but it is football. So let your wife, girlfriend, kids know that this weekend you'll be back in front of the television watching football pretty much all day. And that'll be every weekend from now through February. So once again, everybody out there, this is Kevin Mahalik. This is the 2Close2Call cast sports talk radio show here at USALA Media. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all the social media platforms. Find us on iTunes, Spotify, soon to be available on demand. I appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.